Let me show you what we have going on for, especially for my RCC right now. And for everybody who is not on the phone call, they can review this too. So the Egyptian art quiz should be already in. You should have emailed it to me, and that will be corrected by the end of this week. Unit 8 for the Greeks, we're going to have a short quiz over the weekend. And again, it's again 3 questions, and you answer those, and you can email them to me. I will have it in the Quizlet form, so you can put it in directly into my RCC. If you can't, for some reason, upload, then you go ahead and you put it into a Word document that I'll send you, and email it back to me with your answers.
Professor, question.
Yeah.
How many assignments do we have in outstanding now? The video and the drawing, right?
So those are exercises that will not be graded. Where I'm going to
Okay.
put them in is I'm going to have them in discussion forum. So for you to be able to see each other's work and what each other is doing. Also, these might develop into a larger final project. So these are some small exercises. Once you complete them, I will put them, we will have discussion forum exercises that I will list under discussion forum. There's nothing there now, and we haven't used the discussion forum in a really long time. So I think attaching, and if you are going to put in a video, I think it's important to put it through, my RCC will not support a large video. It's important to download it into YouTube or a different platform that's like Vimeo that will support the size of the file, because usually the videos are going to be much, much larger than just images. So it would be important to put it in YouTube first, and then drop it into, like, give a link to the video. And if you don't know how to do that, and it sounds a bit complicated, I can show you how to do that. And we'll get to that. But today we are going to continue with theory. This time we're looking at, when you go to your textbook, you're going to put in pages 88 and through 98. So that's going to be the chapter which the quiz will be based on. We're also going to, of course, review this work in class, but just make sure you read through those 10 pages. And again, it has a lot of videos, so it shouldn't take more than hopefully a half an hour to get through. And you also get most of the answers right now during the slideshow. Okay. Any questions so far?
You said 80 pages, 88 through.
The pages are
88 to
88 through
89.
89. Yeah, 88 through 89. So
Okay.
it's about 10 pages.
88 to 89
I'm
is
sorry,
1 page.
88 through 90,
99.
88 through,
Oh.
right. It would be 1 page, right? Yeah, that would be nice, wouldn't it? So let's see, it's listed right under, if you go to overview, I think the pages are written in there. It starts at 88, I'm sure about that, and then goes to 98. Thank you for the correction.
Okay.
Sometimes my visuals are dyslexic in terms of numbers, and there you go, 88 through 98. Okay.
All right. And
Okay.
that is due.
So I'm going to have the quiz open until probably Monday. So you'll have the full weekend to get it done. Again, it shouldn't take more than a half an hour, and we're going to discuss the answers and the artwork right now. All right.
Professor,
So
I have a doctor's. I just want to. I have to leave a little early.
That's fine.
Today.
That's not a problem. The video is and should be. Let me just double check that it's recording, but I'm pretty sure it is.
Yes.
Okay. So we're just going to just look at the video when you're done. So we are continuing the Greeks. The Greeks, again, have a huge effect on our culture today. We definitely take a lot of philosophy from the Greeks. We take a lot of aesthetics from the Greeks as well. And they made a huge impression on our own culture with the good as well as the bad. So we need to discuss what that is. Of course, the traces that are left over of what we see from the Greek period is not what they would have seen. So all these marble sculptures that we see today would have had a layer of paint on top, which changes the aesthetics of the sculpture. It's a very, very different thing to be looking at white marble as opposed to skin or pattern or the things that we know that Greek sculpture had. So it's important when we look at history to not take it for what it is, because we don't see the reality that it was. So it's important to just understand that, because we have this idea and we have this ideal. We have our capital that's directly mirrors the Greeks and their architecture as well as the sculpture. And that's it's our own interpretation. It's not real. If it was, then we would have patterns and color all over Washington, D.C., which we don't, which we should. Those of you who are going into art, maybe you can propose some murals. All right, so we're going into the High Classical period from 480 BCE to about 30 BCE is when really the height of classical period and Hellenistic period in Greece developed. So you have here, this is Critias boy. He's in contrapposto, which is an interesting sculptural element. What this means is that over here, the Critias boy, which again, if you look at his eyes and his pupils would have been inlaid with some stone, so it would have been very realistic. But what's happening here, instead of the archaic period where the body was sculpted completely symmetrically, you still have symmetry in the shoulders, but as soon as you get to the waistline, it's tilting, it's at an angle. And that same angle repeats in the knees, and this is called contrapposto. Contrapposto means it's going against, basically you put one weight, one leg, the weight on your leg, meaning you have a natural stance. You have most of your weight on one foot, which is over here in the Critias boy on his left foot over here. And his right foot is bent, and therefore he tilts his hips. If you dance salsa, I think you know what I mean. You put your foot down and automatically your hip comes up, right? That's how you get that hip motion in Latin dances. Well, this is what they've discovered in Greece, is that if you stand on one foot, you have a very naturalistic pose and the hips go out. And therefore, sculptors, what the feat was in sculpture was that they had to sculpt this at an angle, which makes it much more human, much more realistic, the pose. But also is a great feat in sculpture because to do this contrapposto is not so simple. You have to balance the weight of the marble to be able to stand on between these 2 feet, but you're distributing the weight, which is, if you've built any or thought about doing a figure, you have to have those legs to support the rest of the body. And it's very, very difficult to do, especially when you do this contrapposto stance and it's going at an angle like this. Here's another example. So here's the Rice warrior, and actually this is a bronze. Usually most of the sculptures in Greece were in fact bronze. They would not be marble. The marble was usually a Roman copy. So they would have had this bronze sculptures, and this was one that was left behind because most of the time bronze is very special material and it would have been melted down. However, this one was found at the bottom of the Mediterranean intact, which is great because we have an original Greek bronze sculpture. And again, you have the warrior here. Obviously, it shows all of Greek attributes. You have the athletic build, you have the warrior with the shield, right? And Athenians, of course, conquered the Persians at this time, which made them, and they were the underdogs. They were not supposed to win. They were a small country. They were not supposed to win against the Persians, but they did. And so it gave them a sense of individuality. It gave them a sense of the physical and how important that is. So here, this is a prime example of the Greek warrior over here, standing, weight on one leg, again, the knee popping out, but very in human terms, you have the knees going again at an angle, then you have the angle of the hips, and the shoulders also go at an angle to balance the weight of the sculpture so that it could take the full weight. In bronze, it's a little bit easier because you have just the thin, you make the sculpture, then you mold it, and then you pour the bronze inside. You also have the Greek. Have a look over here at the detail at the face. You have the eyes again are inlaid with a different stone, and you have that kind of deep grooved geometry and the pattern of the hair and the beard over here. So this contrapposto is seen throughout the Greek Empire. You have Polyclitus' sculpture over here, which is a Roman replica, which would have replicated a bronze original. It was made in marble from 450 to 440 BCE, before the Common Era. And then you have the Rice warrior over here. The Rice warrior is actually part of a group of, there was an older warrior that was standing with him, and they were probably surrounded with other actually other figures, but of course we don't have those. They have a stance in the middle, so it could have been a public sculpture with a group of these warriors standing around. But of course that has been lost in time. But again, especially in the Polykleides over here, you can definitely see the contrast over here. You have the weight, and again, because it's made out of marble, you have an anchor. You have to have an anchor for these huge sculpted figures because the sculptures would topple. When you're doing it symmetrically, like the chorus boy from the archaic period, it's very symmetrical and you can balance the weight of the stone between the two legs. However, when you're looking at something like this, that's really bending in space. Look at this leg over here. Let me just move this a little bit so that we can see. Look at the leg positions, right? You have one leg completely going to the side here. One leg is straight, and that's the one that's taking the weight. And therefore, have a look over here at the support system back there, right? That's the thing that's holding his whole foot up and the body up. It's not only his leg, but it's also the support. If he didn't have, there's again these supports at the side with the stone, because the weight of the hand would have fallen off had it not been there. He's also holding a spear, and that's also taking a little bit of the weight of that material. Okay, so you can see the angle of the knees is going down, his hips are going down, and then his shoulders are sort of counterbalancing with his head tilting to the side. So a huge feat for sculpture, and huge realism and naturalism in the poses in the body. Right, and so we're going to move into a classical architecture. Again, it's almost like architecture reflected the art of the time. You have the Acropolis in Athens. Number one over here is the Parthenon. This is the old temple to Athena, and this is the Erechtheum over here at the rear. You have this architecture created at the top of the hill, the Acropolis in Athens, and it is really something to behold because it's such a monumental architecture. It is so huge, and it is made out of solid marble. So let's have a look at the details of the amazing Parthenon right here. And the architects here are Iktinos and Allicrates. You don't have to remember their names. So this is from 447 BCE. You have this in mathematical proportion. So you have 8 columns at the front and at the back, and you have 17 columns on the side. What we're looking at here are marble drums. These are the Doric order, these columns that are going to suspend and hold the roof structure of the Parthenon. And you really have to have this post and lintel system. So each of these beams are taking the weight of the roof over here. And in fact, the ruins that we see now are misconceived. The Parthenon was standing for a long time until about the 1500s, when then it was broken. So actually it survived thousands of years in pristine condition until I'm not sure if the city got bombarded or what happened. But you can see that these drums of these columns over here that are supporting the architecture are actually cut drums. So if you look at the columns over here to the back, you can see it more clearly. They're stacked, they're carved first, and then they're stacked and put on top of each other. What's interesting about these columns is that they're not just one size and then stacked on top of each other. The architects of the Parthenon really wanted to make it visually pleasing. And so they have the columns actually bowing out in the center. So they get a little bit wider towards the center, and then they get narrower and taper to the top. Again, when you're walking up in relation, have a look at the person over here in the back. This tiny image is a person in the middle of the Parthenon. In relation to this architecture, the people you're minuscule, you're tiny in comparison. And really that's what gave the Parthenon such a huge monumental feeling. It also was a temple that housed a 40-foot sculpture of Athena. So what would happen is there would be a procession that would go around. You would come up to the Acropolis. You could walk around in this almost like a porch setting where you could walk all the way around. And then the temple was housed within. So you can see it over here. You have like a colonnade that's sheltering you in case there's rain. Then you have the temple inside here. You have a different set of columns over here supporting more of the roof. And then you have even smaller columns in the center, and inside of the temple would be a huge sculpture to Athena. Athena is the patron goddess of Athens. That's why it's called Athens, and she was fighting for it with, I believe it was one of the other gods. Might have been the god of water, but I'll get back to you. You'll get it in your reading anyway. So Athena wins to be the patron goddess, and therefore they erect this amazing temple in her honor. But also it's a space where you go do legal matters. It's also a space where, so it's not only a religious space, but it also shows a lot of wealth and power for Athenians to be able to achieve this feat, to put up this architecture. Before then, you're thinking about most architecture is just to build a home, right, for yourself, to put a roof over your head. But these are really public spaces that people can go in, as opposed to something like in Egypt, where the monumental architecture is meant to house the dead, right? And the pyramids are thought to be, which we're not sure, but it's thought to be that it's for the dead. However, the Parthenon is made for the public. It's made for Greek people to be able to have, show the prestige of the city, show what the city can do. And certainly they do that in this architecture. Not only that, but they, in the Parthenon, you can see over here the Doric order. They would have sculptures all the way in this entablature. And then there's a triangular pediment over here where full-size sculptures would be. You have a little leftover of a sculpture of a horse over here and a figure over here at the very, very top. But what's interesting about the math of the Parthenon is that they try to account for our visual, the way that we see this architecture. What they did was, if you look at the spacing between the columns over here, they actually get smaller to the edges. So when you look at this, there's the same size over here and here, but between the last two columns and the corner column, you have the space a little bit smaller. That's because if the space was the same size, it would feel like those last columns on the edge were falling out of the architecture. So they closed them a little bit in. So you have this column and this column at the edge a little bit closer to its neighbor over here, as opposed to the space that's in between. So that accounts for our visual, the way that we see it, right? We see it as perfect, but it's not. You also have the floor of the Parthenon curving by 1.5 inches over here in the center. So it bows up. It makes it seem like it's perfectly straight. But again, it bows up in the center a little bit to account for our own visual, the way that we see it, which is quite extraordinary for the architects to be thinking about, not only mathematically how to do this amazing architecture, but to account for human error in visual terms is quite extraordinary. So here you see it over here, and here you can also see how closer you have. And these are the inner columns that would have been housing the temple itself, and inside of that would have been the temple to Athena. And again, this is the Doric order looking at the Acropolis. So outside of the Parthenon, outside of the Parthenon would have been these amazing sculptures that were on all sides of the Parthenon. You would have a frieze, a procession that would have taken place where the Greeks themselves depicted, which is unusual. Usually in sculpture, you depict the ruler, but of course we know that Greece was the seat of democracy, and the Greek people depicted themselves on the procession. So they would be women and men walking around the Parthenon, and they would be sculpted on all or four sides. The other thing that was the other sculptures on the Parthenon was the Greeks winning over various cultures. So over here we have a male fighting with a centaur, right? The myth with the centaurs, and having the win over the centaur. So you would have had 4 stories of how the Greeks were winning over certain other cultures, like the centaurs over here. This was them winning over the Amazon. Sack of Troy was over at the top. And so you had the Greeks in their kind of fights winning over and over all around the sculptures of the Parthenon before we get to the top and we'll show you that. So have a look at this sculpture in particular. So here is a leper, I think, hold on one second. Sorry about that. Lapith, I'm sorry. This is a Lapith winning over a centaur. Lapith was another word for a Greek, and he's defeating a fight here with the centaur over here. He has him really hooked. You can't see it, but this back arm is hooked around his neck, really pulling him to the opposite side. But sculpturally, it's really interesting sculpture. It's a relief, so it means that it's attached to the back of this stone over here. However, the body is fully out of the rock. So you have the centaur over here is attached, I think, with the back of the horse's back over here to the marble. However, this figure is cut fully out, so it's all three-dimensional out of the stone, which is again technically an incredible feat, because when you're carving, you have to go from the top down, and you would have to go around this whole body before you get to the back and behind there, especially in this kind of drapery. You also have the body draped, the drapery behind this body really creates a shadow so that you can see the full body of the male. And of course, that's what the Greeks are really prizing, is these youthful bodies that are fighting over here, that have won all these wars for the Greeks, especially for Athenians.
Question.
Yeah.
This picture you show us human body plus animal legs.
Yes, that's a
Is
centaur.
symbol or a representation of something?
It's actually a myth, right? Greeks have a lot of mythology, of fighting gods, of fighting giants, of fighting, and it's a mythical story, right? And from the times of the Egyptians, there would always be bodies that were maybe put together through different animals. So the body of a lion with the head of a snake, for example, right? In Egyptian art. In Greek times, they made them even more personal by having half of the animal a body of a horse, and half of the half of it was a body of a person. So centaur is another name for that kind of creature, but it is mythological as far as we know. As far as we know. So you have the myth of the Lapith defending the centaur. Again, there's others that are along the Parthenon that describe other conquests of the Greeks over another culture. This is an interesting gravestone. After these public sculptures were formed for the Parthenon, because a lot of art in Greece was about the public. It was for the common good. It was for the people. The other times that sculptors were working was, of course, on tombstones. And this is one of the interesting tombstone of Hegesso. She is over here, sculpted again in the Greek tradition from the relief. She's here with her either servant or slave over here to the left, who's holding a jewelry box. And then Hegesso is, we've now lost the detail of the jewelry that she's holding, but she's seen as sort of sitting down. Let's have a look at her full body over here. She's seen in relief. You see the entire body, even though it's in low relief. It's carved very shallow at the very corner, and that gets darker and darker and more three-dimensional as she is closer to us. We have, again, this is sort of a domestic scene. So women in Greece did not have the power to vote. They were known as the wife of or the daughter of. So they didn't have a whole huge power. At the same time, this is unusual where women have their own tombstone. So she was definitely upper class to be able to commission a tombstone, right? Or the family was able to commission a tombstone for her. And again, but it's a very different gesture. So the body language between these two figures as opposed to the male figures is drastically different. You have Hegesso here sitting in what looks like sort of a home setting, which is really where women were seen, that was in their space, in their role. But certainly they wouldn't be out in public. In fact, they would have to, I believe, be covered, right? And they would not have the same rights that males had in Greek times. All right, and we're going to move into the late classical period. So we're looking over here. So Athens is over here at the very tip. Again, a relatively small country in relation to all of Persia over here. But what made the Athenians really strong and therefore their artwork really inspirational was because they won all these wars that they, again, were the underdogs, and they expanded their territory even though they were a small little culture or country. The Peloponnesian Wars between 431 BCE and 404 ended with a plague, weakened Athens surrendering to Sparta. Macedonian invasion in 338 BCE led to Philip II, who was assassinated in 336 BCE and succeeded by his son Alexander the Great, who would die in 323 BCE. All right, so there's a little bit of turmoil that happens within the Greek culture. So when we're going to compare, and I want you to look at all three of these. Remember, this is a fresco from the Palace of Knossos, which is at the bottom of Crete, right before you get to Greece. In Crete, there's the bull jumping that happens. That so maybe is a transition between teenagehood into adulthood. We have the Stele of Hegesa over here, and over here we have Polyclitus. So look at the depictions. The fresco over here, because of the coloring of the skin, we think is a female, not 100% sure, but it would have been this kind of gymnastic feat that they were doing over the bull. Then we have the woman over here, and then we have Polyclitus. So tell me the similarities and the differences that you see between these two sculptures and one fresco. Talk to me about anything that you see, body positions, talk to me about naturalism, talk to me about roles of men and women. What do you see from just this image?
For me, the picture number 3, I feel I see some sort of like emotion there when I don't know, whatever she's giving to the exchange, or one is giving something to one another. I think the person standing was giving it the one sitting down, and kind of like some sort of emotion going through their faces, which I really like. I like that picture. It's very beautiful sculpture. And then this last one, it kind of like somebody is dropping. I don't know, they're doing gymnastics, so they kind of like dancing. Yeah.
Right. The one on the left is doing that acrobatic feat. Remember the bull that they were leaping over. And it was interesting because the ancient shards are over here on the right. Those are the painted that were painted before. These lines in between were actually painted by someone who was restoring the painting. So these are new marks over here in between, and these shards are the old pieces of the original fresco. But what the archaeologist did is he hired someone to restore and repaint this painting, so we get the full effect. But yes, we have this really dramatic sort of gymnastics feat over here. We have another physical athletic body over here in Polyclitus. And then this very quiet domestic scene over here in the center with Hegesa. And again, we think that this was a jewelry box and she would have been observing her jewels or whatever they were in this kind of domestic setting. But you're right, there's something about the psychology of the faces that's interesting. There's not a lot of expression, which in Greek art sometimes you have, and sometimes you have this kind of generic mathematical proportions to the face. So that's it for the quiz. This particular slideshow is going to show you what is going to be in the quiz. However, I would like to fully cover Greeks, and I have one more slideshow if you're, first of all, if you're interested, and second of all, I think it's important. I think it's important to know what the Greeks were all about because we're such a similar culture.
Those three artwork you show us now, they are all from Greek, right?
They're all from Greece. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And we saw that early geometric period on Monday, right? And the archaic period, which wasn't as realistic. But this slideshow is going to finish with the Hellenistic period, which is really what the Greeks are known for. And I want to cover that. However, it's the Hellenistic period. This thing that I'm now going to show you is not included in the quiz. So you don't have to worry about it in terms of the quiz. But I want to show you because the sculpture is just incredible. So I'm going to show you this last slideshow. If you need some coffee, go and get it. And then we're jumping straight in. So the Hellenistic period. So you're thinking about the Greeks over here in Athens, but there Alexander the Great takes the country and expands it all the way to almost India over here in through the Middle East and down into Egypt. Alexander the Great in 323, and he lasts to the death of Cleopatra and Mark Antony in 30 CE. So once they sack or they kill off Cleopatra and Mark Antony in Egypt, they also conquer this section of the Nile. So again, you're talking about a vast territory from a tiny place over here from Athens that took the entire region over here in the Adriatic and Aegean Seas. Okay. And the Hellenistic period is the last period of the Greeks before really the Romans take over. And you have it till about, again, in the 300s to after birth of Christ, after the Common Era that we now count. BCE means before the Common Era, before the Christ of birth, before 0 is when we start counting, of course, and then after CE is during our sort of epic. But again, the numbers are kind of funny because we think that we started at 0 and we're in 2020, but it doesn't make, of course, any sense because there's a huge lineage of humanity, right? So we're moving into the Hellenistic period. The center of Greek Empire changed into Pergamon, which would have been contemporary Turkey. So therefore, the Athens expanded itself way into Turkey and all the way through the Middle East. And they built this the altar to Zeus over here, and it would have been a very different kind of temple than, for example, the Parthenon. This temple, instead of having going up and having a pediment and the sculptures being in that pediment, these sculptures are actually on a frieze right at the stairs when you're entering the pediment. And these sculptures are almost going into our space over here. They overlap, and we can get up close and personal to these sculptures, which is incredible. So it's a very different feeling because now suddenly you're with the gods. You're in the battles with them. You're not looking up at them. And here's a detail of what we see in the frieze, in the sculptures. This is Athena over here in the center. Unfortunately, we've lost her face, and she's battling. It shows the gods of Greece battling the giants. Okay, so here she's battling Neos. I don't know about that pronunciation. But you have a look at the body. So Athena is in full control over here. She's grabbed the giant by his hair. But what's interesting about and she has her snakes that are the symbol for Athena that are sort of finishing off the giant over here. But what's interesting in Hellenistic period is that you have this huge sense of drama that's happening. You have this really deep cut. Again, that huge shadow means that the carving goes all the way around. And you have these draperies that are really cut and set into that marble. And again, even though it's relief, it's attached to the background, it still feels like it's coming out. Here is an interesting sculpture from, it's a Roman copy, but it would have been an original bronze from Greece from around 230 and 250 BCE, again in the Hellenistic period. And this is the dying ghoul. What the Greeks did is they would have these scenes of battles, but they would also show a little bit of empathy here for their enemies. So the ghouls were an enemy clan. They're not like the Greeks. You can see and look at the difference in the texture of the hair, which symbolized in a way the different people that they conquered. And you have, but you have this kind of empathy the way that it's sculpted. So look at the body shape. Look at it, how it's lying down over here. Of course, you have the pressure and the weight of the body on this hand and the back in particular, and the muscles that are supporting them. You can also look at the veins of the hands that are really, and again, this is what Greeks are really known for, is these really realistic details, right? Of course, this was stone or bronze, but it, you know, portrayed the human figure really, really well. Then when you look at the expression and the detail of the face, you really find that the sculptor perhaps had some empathy for this figure particularly. You can look at his face, you can see the deep light eyes. He's really you can see the wound over here at the side, so he's definitely taking his last breath. I am not sure about the neck that he's wearing, if it's a rope or if it's a necklace of some sort. It looks like a necklace, but I can't be sure. But then again, you have the expression of the details of the face, which make it very, very appealing, and emotionally you get attached to this, the enemy of the Greeks. So there's something in the sculptures where they really empathize with those that are dying. So you have, again, a detail over here of the dying ghoul, this now looking up at his face. And you can compare it to when we were looking at the pediment at the beginning of the classical period in Greece, at the Temple of Aphia in Greece. This is another warrior that has fallen, and it would have gone into that corner of that pediment. They did a very smart thing with the pediments, because they were triangular, to try to fit those sculptures in there. And so the dying ones would have been at the very end. And again, there's realism there. There's realism within the body. However, when you look at his face of the bottom one, the dying warrior, he still has, you know, somewhat of a smile on his face. Whereas looking at this, what do you see in this, in the dying ghoul, in this sculpture, this Hellenistic sculpture? What do you see in the face as opposed to this one? Give me anything that you see. Give me the details that you see. So what's the difference between this sculpture and this one over here? Right, you have the furrows of the brow over here that are accentuated, right? That's like a concerned look. So all those tiny little details when he's like pressing his, that's either like he's in pain, right? We know that expression. And over here, this one still sort of lacks that expression. And the Hellenistic period is especially known for this dramatic expression. Of course, the Nike is a symbol. She's a goddess, she's a winged goddess. And when you look at, she would have been, in fact, in a place where the wind would have been blowing, and the draper, it seems like the sculptor really captured the wind around her. So the wings are just opening. You have the drapery really flowing around her body, and that's a very classical style. So it's not only that the drapery is doing its own thing, it's really following the contours of Nike over here, really wind gusted. And she would have been standing at what looks like sort of the top of a ship in the particular sculpture that they found her at. So the wind and the location of the sculpture were in fact very particular to the sculpture, where the body really is hugged by the clothing that it's wearing, the drapery. And that's a very contemporary sort of Greek style, or old Greek style. And then the last few sculptures are focused on, this is from 100 BC. And what's interesting about the boxer over here is that, in fact, in his face, again, this kind of idea of empathy towards the person who has lost. So Greeks are all about showing the youthful body, the athletic body, and the winning body. It's rare that we see a body that's seated. So this is again a Greek original, it was found at the bottom of the lake. Again, because of the bronze, the sculptures would have been melted down. But this one is an original because it survived underwater. And you have on his face, if you look closely, you can see scars on his face from the battle. So he has, this is at the end of the fight, where he has broken some skin. Maybe there's some stitching or stitches in his face, right? You also have
some bruise.
Go ahead.
I said some bruises.
Yes, definitely bruises. And look at his ear. It's that cauliflower ear. When boxers are boxing, right? The cartilage breaks and it takes on different shapes. So you have the ear over here that is, this is definitely a boxer. But he's at the end of the fight, and he's, whether he's lost or not, his body is still muscular, but worn out, right? Which is interesting for the Greeks, because they always show the best of the, of the athletics, and this one in particular shows the end, the opposite side, right? The one that's defeated. He's a little bit older, not quite as slim as most of the Greek bodies. You can see his tummy over here. You also have this really great detail. Have a look over here at the boxing gloves. I mean, that's such an amazing, right, contour, the fingers, just such a precise way of sculpting. It's pretty incredible. And we're going to end up with, this is a Roman replica, but it definitely describes the Hellenistic drama. It also describes the positions of the body. So here you have Lacan and his sons. Lacan was a Trojan, and he warned the Trojans that there's going to be a Trojan horse, that the Greeks are going to invade. And in fact, Athena sends her snakes to come and finish him off and his sons. So you have him at the end of his life here, battling for his life. But you can see, look at the anguish in his face, right? Look at the furrowed brows, the concern that's in his face. And that really describes the Hellenistic period. It's this drama within the body, still has a very muscular body, right? Like the Greeks love. But here it's towards the end of life. These snakes are twisting and turning throughout these three figures. These are his sons. This is him standing over here, but he's taken a bite over here, so he's about to die. Anyway, very, very dramatic sculpture, and also life size. So it's a very showy piece. It's a very interesting. It was meant to be in public, and you have this sort of scene at the end of life over here. And of course, the expressions tell us a lot about not just the physical bodies that he's sculpting, but about the emotion that's happening. Okay. Anyone want to compare the altar of Zeus over here on the left, which again, it would be in contemporary Turkey, or Parthenon over here in Athens? When you look at these two architectures, what do you see?
The one at the right is more stronger in structure than the one at the left. But in terms of artistic design, I think the left side has more artistical design than the right one.
So they are, they're about 300 or 400 years apart, but certainly the architecture within this one is so strong, and so it towers over. It's so high, and the details, the artistic details would have been set. The sculptures would have been here at the top for people to see and come admire, right? Whereas the altar of Zeus here, when you come up to the altar of Zeus, you are surrounded by the architecture. You're enveloped in it. It's covers three sides. It goes from the left to the middle and then to the right. So you really enter into that sculpture, into the temple and into the sculpture itself. Yes, and the sculpture was just powerful, and it showed the gods battling the giants. So it was really showy. Greeks were all about showing off their stuff, really. I wanted you to see that, and that's not in your reading, but that's just the next chapter if you would like to read about the Greeks. Your quiz will be in by tomorrow, and then I wanted to see if anyone wanted to share their pieces or what you're thinking about in terms of permanent and impermanent art. We can also do a little painting today if you're interested. So talk to me about your piece. What are you getting rid of? What are you carving out? And then talk to me about what you want to make permanent. What are those laws that you want to live by, regardless of where the politics goes over the next it feels like weeks. What are the things that, even if you write them down for yourself, right, and put them in your space, it's just good to have those laws around. So anyone want to share what they're doing for their sculpture or their painting or rocks or soap or candles? Do you have your pieces? And I'm going to switch my camera view, and feel free to hold up your work if you want. Again, we're going to do a little, I think, painting today, although we didn't finish the sculptures. Talk to me. What are you creating? What do you want to get rid of in terms of impermanent material? And again, you don't have, this is an exercise. This is for you. So you can develop these pieces as you want. If you feel just like you want to do an exercise and get it done, that's fine too. I think if you write 1 or 2 laws for yourself in permanent marker somewhere and put them up somewhere, that's enough, right? So you don't have to spend a whole lot of time. I just want you to think about what you want to get rid of and what you want to persist, what you want to keep for thousands and thousands of years. Talk to me, Georgina. What are you thinking about? Permanent, impermanent, or Ayamide, or Olusegun? Anyone jump in?
I still get
question again.
Remember that we were looking at the Egyptians and trying to do a practice with looking at the stele of the lost stele of Hammurabi, right? So that permanent sculpture on rock, on stone, that would have been something that doesn't go away, right? Like oil on rock will not wash away. You can put this outside. And you want to think about who you're representing or what kind of message you want to send. Who do you want permanently somewhere for thousands and thousands of years, so that when people see, or any intelligent entity thousands of years from now can look at this and say, who was this person? Why were they important? And it doesn't have to be obviously a person or a portrait. It can just be the language. You can write down, on the back, I wrote inspired by George Floyd, right? Rest in peace. So you want to, on the backs of the rocks, you can put down your belief system, how you want to relate with other people. Does that clarify? And I can go back and share with you that write-ups, if that helps. That might be a little bit more helpful. So we're talking about, let's see, when we go back to Unit 7, we're thinking about the practice from the Egyptians that they inspired. So reflection on Egyptians, and again, you'll have another one. We're going to be reflecting on the Greeks next week with color. So here's the write-up for some ideas to do an exercise. You really think about how to take the theory that we see in the artwork from the ancients and putting that into practice, and really learning from the ancients. I think it's so important to look at previous cultures and know what they did right, but also know what they did wrong and how we could correct that. Otherwise, we're sort of repeating these same or similar cycles. So you have this write-up, right? You want to consider for the exercise the idea of permanence, the laws that you might want to live by, and make them in a permanent material. So what permanent material can we think about? We can think about rock. You can think about even wood, although that is a little bit softer and will deteriorate over time. Plastic will not deteriorate. Plastic is a somewhat permanent material. So just think about what the exercise is made of, and whether you just write a word that you think we should continue into the future, right?
What about a plank? A plank.
A blank?
If I get a plank, can I write something on it?
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. I think that would be fine. You can write on, I think if you write on paper, it's going to be able to deteriorate. It's fine. If you have nothing else, you can do a pen on paper. That's fine. That's a little bit more permanent than a pencil. But if you have something that's a little bit more permanent, plastic again will work. What else? Rock will work. Some wood will work.
What about wood? Wood or plank?
Wood, right? A plank of wood, yes. So yes, wood will be a little, you can carve into the wood, which will make it a little bit more solid than just writing on top of it. The wood will be okay. Know that the wood won't last as long as a rock or plastic, because the wood will if it was left outside, it would deteriorate over time. So just think about those two issues. And again, you can paint or write a word. I think most of the philosophers came down to the fact that the reason why we're on the planet, right? There's just one word, right? Most everyone, and from Plato to Aristotle to the Greek philosophers to anyone who's thought about why we're on the planet, the one word that they always come to, of course, is love, right? We're pretty much on the planet for that, right? And then we have to define what that is. But you can come to your own other laws, other words. You can spell out full sentences. You can have just one word and write it down. And then the other part of it we already did, the impermanent one, we were talking about carving into soft material that we would then wash away. Okay, any questions? Again, it's an exercise. It will not be corrected. It will not give you a grade, okay? So don't worry about doing this for a grade. This is just to start giving you ideas of what you may think is important and what you may want to focus on for your final, really. Because all these projects can be developed into a final. Any other questions? Okay, and I think I will continue and work and paint, but you certainly don't have to stay on the phone call. I'm going to take a little rock. I'm going to start doing a little bit of painting. You can watch the video later. You're certainly not required to stay. If you have questions, let me know. But otherwise, you're welcome to go and do your work and start doing your reading from page 88 to 98. Okay. And then the quiz will be on my RCC by tomorrow, and I will also email it to you so you can respond to that, okay?
Are we going to get the video today as well?
Yes, it will be in the announcements. It'll probably be in by the end of the day, okay? So usually it takes a half a day for it to convert into, okay?
Thank you so much.
Very welcome. Ayomide, do you have any questions or comments about the project that you're doing? And because it was such an interesting one that you had the hazard symbol in the soap.
Yeah, you said I should get some words to the back.
Yeah. What did you think about what word?
I think we were agreed on police.
Yeah. I think those two would be very, very important. Think about if you replicated that piece all throughout the US and just left these soaps inside the bathrooms throughout the United States, or just in police stations, right? It might change some minds. It might make people think in a different way. So the potential of that project is really, really exciting. Any ideas for the permanent project? What do you want to stay? What do you want to remain? So hazardous police we want to get rid of, but what is the thing that you really want to make permanent?
The major thing is like getting it like what to work with.
Say that one more time.
I don't got the rock or the stick or the wood. I ain't got. Trying to think like what to work on. Like I don't have that yet.
So let's think about it together. Like, what are the rest of you thinking about? What kind of law do you want to live by? What kind of how do you want to relate to other people? What is that thing that you want to make permanent? Is it a word? Is it a philosophy? Is it a how do you say that aliens came and they knew our culture, right? What would you want to persist? What and I don't know. Hopefully, I'm just describing this. What do you want to make permanent? I guess is the only way that I can describe it. What do we want to be lasting?
Try to get a positive message.
One more time.
I said try to pass across positive message.
Positive, yeah. What's the positive message? What kind of what do we want to say? And you're right. I mean, yeah, absolutely, of course, right.
It'll be a love, hope. Love,
hope. Yeah. Absolutely.
What I'm really having a problem with is getting the material to work with.
Okay. I wonder if you could. I don't know if you have any. Do you have permanent markers? A Sharpie?
I mean, my theory to work on, like I got permanent marker, I got paint, I got all that.
Oh, great. Yeah, so any of that, you just are thinking about then the surface area, the surface that you want to put it on. I think if you're using paint, working on a piece of wood could that could be enough because the paint will.
That's the problem.
Could you I mean, for wood, is there any forest around that you could go to and you know, branches will last, and it doesn't have to
No,
be a
any
large
that
piece
I
of
know
wood.
of.
Also, the rocks, if you go to the beach, right, there's a ton of rocks that are possible to get. Where else could we get material? Any plastic that you can paint on plastic. Anything that comes wrapped to the house in large sheets of plastic that you can use.
Yeah, that could work.
So something that is, you know, lying around. Oftentimes we don't consider recycling to, or things that are in the recycling, we consider that trash, right? But usually there should be some material lying around that you can maybe use for that. If you can't find anything, doing just one of these projects is enough to get you thinking about doing something important. It could be either the impermanent project or the permanent one. Again, it's for you to practice, right? You want to think about the Egyptian culture and perhaps carving and what they accomplished, but you don't have to do. I think if you have one of those exercises, either on impermanence or permanence, I think that's good enough. All right, because next week we're going to get into the Greeks and we're going to think about color. So yeah, so you don't have to go overboard with this one. Okay, Kenny, what are you thinking about?
I'm thinking about crafting like writing down laws now.
Okay, and what kind of laws do you want to live by? Spell them out.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna do a law about like equality or something like that relating to that law.
I think that's a great idea. So you might want to look into the Declaration of Independence and the equality laws that we already at least have written down. It's not that we practice them, but we already have some laws in place. So you can make more of those. You can take those as a starting point and create your own from them. You can also think about the key words that are within the Declaration that make it an important document, right? Of course, the Founding Fathers didn't intend it to be for everybody, but that's what it states inside of the Declaration. So that would be great. That sounds like a great idea. What material can you use to think about permanence?
I was thinking about using paper first.
Okay.
I might find like a wood or like a wood plank or something like that.
Okay.
But I did do the carving and I didn't really know how to like transfer it into a YouTube video.
Oh, let me show you how to do that. And I wonder, let me just share the screen.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. I think if you go to YouTube, and I don't know if you need to have your own channel, let's have a look. And this might be a question for more than one of you. And when you go to YouTube, you should be able to get, let's close this. There's a symbol over here. Once it comes forward, that says create, and you want to click on that one. It looks like a little movie camera. And then you want to go to upload video. So you take that, and then usually I have our class videos. So you click on upload video, and then select files, and the select files will go directly, it will be linked to your computer. And you can, for me, I have all our Zoom classes, so I can go ahead and take one of those, right? Take that video, I click open, and it starts uploading that video, okay? And then it takes you through just a couple of questions. Do you want to make the video public? Is it for children? And so you answer those questions and it goes through an upload process that takes a few minutes, but it's relatively simple. It might be a little harder to do from a phone. I haven't tried it from a phone yet. So if you're working with a phone, you should be able to go to YouTube from your phone and again, click the upload button and then select the file and then you should be able to download. So go through that process and see if you have any questions. If you can't, I can also find some tutorials that might walk you through it in YouTube, and I'll drop those into my RCC. Okay?
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Okay, guys.
I got one more.
Go ahead.
With the Greek quiz, when is that due?
So we're going to have it due probably on Monday. I will put it in
Okay.
tomorrow, and you'll have about 4 days to complete it.
All right.
Okay?
All right, thanks.
Very welcome. Have a good one. Take care, guys. I'm going to end the meeting unless anyone has any more questions. Okay, good.